Wow, is it that time of the month again? Hey y'all, I'd like to thank my sponsor for this video, but I don't have one. So I guess we'll just get right to it. Guns! How do they work? Now there seems to be a lot of mysticism surrounding the operation of firearms, so I thought I'd break it down for everybody so that you can go about your days. Guns are super easy to understand. They're basically potato cannons. Like that one you built with your cool uncle that one time, except they don't smell like cheap beer and stripper glitter. Simply load around and then set off an explosive charge, and there you go. Gun achieved. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Wait, I guess there's more to it than that. Guns work using something called the cycle of operations. Almost every gun currently in production has to follow these steps in order to fire correctly. Despite the fact that it's a very simple concept to grasp, it's not really something that a lot of people talk about when they're talking about guns. I'm going to take a minute to point out that I said almost every gun and not every gun because I know how the internet loves to argue about semantics. The basic cycle of operations, be it for a pistol or for a rifle or even for a machine gun, is all the same. Firing, unlocking, extracting, ejecting, cocking, feeding, chambering, and locking. These 8 steps must be completed for a gun to fire. Sometimes the order's a little different, and sometimes multiple steps are being completed at the same time, but still, for the majority of modern firearms, this is how the world works. Since the advent of the self-contained cartridge, the cycle of operations has been the de facto law for firearms design. All 8 steps need to be addressed, so let's go over them so we can talk about how guns work. First, let me introduce my beautiful assistant. This is a 1943 made Mosin Nagant Model 9130. It's an upgraded version of the Russian 3-line rifle from 1891. So let's get right into it. First, we're going to talk about feeding, which refers to collecting a spare round off the top of the feeding device, be it a magazine, an M-block clip, the feed ramp, or simply inserting a round by hand. Feeding happens when a new round is introduced to the chamber. Next is chambering. Chambering is when you push the fresh round all the way into the chamber of the gun. The chamber is usually one of the strongest parts of the gun because of the immense pressure generated later. Once a fresh round is chambered, we need to make sure it stays there. Thus, most modern guns will lock closed on the chamber to prevent any premature opening or detonation. Remember, there's literally a small explosion going off in there. You don't want any of that to get out. Locking is usually accomplished by some sort of locking lug, like these here that will lock into the end of the barrel. Locking is achieved on this rifle by rotating the bolt handle down. Firing is achieved by pulling on the weapon's trigger, which activates the hammer or pin, a firing pin to be exact, causing it to strike the primer on the base of the cartridge. The primer contains a small contact explosive. This ignites the main powder charge, creating a large volume of pressurized gas which sends a projectile out the front of the barrel. This step makes a distinct popping sound. Lifting the bolt handle unlocks the bolt. Just like we had to lock the chamber before, we have to unlock it now. Kind of like how you lock your car when you go to the bar, and then you have to break in later because the bartender took your keys after you tried to fight that little person. Wait, that might not be right. Anyway. Extracting refers to the removal of an empty shell case from the chamber. This was a big technological conundrum in the early days due to the materials that they originally tried to make casings out of. We have it figured out now. Extracting is done by this little technological wizard called the extractor. Ejecting is the step that kicks the empty shell out of the gun. It ejects it. It's pretty self-explanatory. Look, naming things is super easy. Mitch Hedberg did a bit about this. And finally, we have cocking. This step is usually combined with another step somewhere in the process, depending on the gun. Cocking refers to resetting the spring or hammer that holds the firing pin in place. This rifle cocks when the bolt is open, and this rifle cocks on close. This rifle cocks as a spent shell is ejected. It's just a step that needs to get done. And that brings us back to the beginning of the cycle. Just for funsies, I'm going to show how it works on an AR to demystify the whole ordeal. So just so we're all on the same page, the AR is not the only type of weapon that actually uses the gas-operated system. People have been doing this for the past 100 or so years. Anyway, let's get into it. The first thing that's going to happen in the AR system is you're going to fire the weapon. And that's accomplished, obviously, by pulling the trigger. You see that little hammer fly up. When that hammer comes up, it's going to strike the firing pin on the inside of the bolt carrier group in the upper receiver. Once fired, the projectile will fly down the barrel. Once it gets to a spot right about here, gas will be vented up into a gas tube above the barrel. high pressure gas will be sent back and impinge on this reciprocating bolt carrier group. The bolt carrier group will unlock, extract the fired round, eject the fired round, cock this hammer, pick up a new round, feed it in, completely chamber that round, and lock, operating on the same 8 basic principles that firearms have been working on for the past couple hundred years. So the AR is not some magic murder machine. It's the product of engineering, and it works on exactly the same principles that guns have used for the past 150 some odd years. See, all that was pretty straightforward. So now that we have the cycle of operations down, I hope you took notes. There's a test later. Let's talk about how wrong the media gets guns in one specific term: description. There's 4 basic types of gun: single shot, repeating, semi-automatic, and fully automatic. Single shot refers to guns that have, well, single shot capabilities. You shoot once and then it's all over. You have to personally see to all other steps in the cycle of operation. Popular examples include the muzzleloader in modern guns like the Thompson rifles or break-action shotguns. Repeating guns follow the same cycle but leave less to the shooter to complete. Repeaters gained popularity in America's westward expansion with the Henry repeating lever-action rifles. Common examples of repeaters are things like bolt-action, lever-action, and pump-action rifles and shotguns. A simple manipulation of controls will get the shooter to fire again. Next, we have semi-automatics, and this is where things get tricky because many people call them automatics. Historically, the naming gets a little murky, but the legal definition is in black and white. Semi-automatics fire 1 round after every trigger pull. No more than 1 round is fired, and no operator action is required aside from pulling the trigger. Once you release the trigger, you're ready to fire again. Finally, there's fully automatic. Full auto means that there's no operator action required once you start to pull that bang switch. As long as you're holding the trigger, the gun will continue to fire rounds until you release the trigger or until you run out of ammo. Fully automatic guns are heavily regulated, but not illegal in most states. Most fully automatic guns have semi-automatic clones available to the civilian market. So some people might still be a little bit confused about these different types of guns. Well, do I have great news! I understand that not everyone has literally had access to the Marine Corps arsenal in their lifetime, so I thought of a neat way to explain the basics of all these types of guns using something that most everyone has experienced. Cars! More specifically, transmissions. Single shot is like bumper cars. Repeaters are like manual transmissions. Semi-automatic are like clutchless manuals or paddle shifters. And automatics are like automatics. Not following? Let's take it slow. Single shot is like bumper cars. You hit the gas and you go. That's it. You're just going. It doesn't last long until you have to get out and go to the back of the line. Who rides the bumper cars just once? And then while you're standing in line and after you wait and you go through the steps, you get to do it again. So I have a little Derringer here just to show that the principles hold true for single shot and break action weapons. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock the weapon. Unlock. And then this is the extractor. So you push this forward to extract, and then you can pull out the spent rounds or eject them. You can feed new rounds in, chamber them. Once they're chambered, just lock it back up, and then cock the hammer, and you're ready to fire. Firing, unlocking, extracting, ejecting, cocking, feeding, chambering, locking. Repeaters are like manual transmissions. They take a little practice, but basically you hit the gas, do a few things, and then you just keep going until you run out of gears to shift to. They're much better than single shots. Vroom! 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 Semi-automatic is like a paddle shift in a sports car. You're going along at your own pace, and if you feel like hitting another gear, you just engage a control. Except instead of another gear, it's another round. There's no clutch, no complicated movements on the tree or on the shifter, just a firm pull on an aperture until you run out of gears. Vroom, 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 vroom. Just like that. And finally, fully automatic is like a regular automatic transmission. You hit the gas and you keep going until you're out of gears. No interaction is required except for keeping your aim straight. You just keep going. And so there you go. The operation of firearms isn't really some sort of weird kind of crazy science that people are just kind of pulling out of nowhere. It's a very simple operation that has been going on for years and years and years. Now that you're a little bit more informed, go ahead and spread the word. I'll see you again around this time next month. And as always, if you have a question, just ask. Why are there so many syllables in automatic firearm? And block clip. Oh, somebody's gonna bitch about my manicure, which I've never done. The cat thinks I'm pretty. Or not. And no operator action is required aside from pulling the trigger. Once you release... I love this movie. That's not even gonna work. Why would I do that? 130-year-old gun, museum piece, and I'm making race car noises with it. This is the dumbest thing ever. Ta-da.